Hello again, everyone. Ken from Whittling Woods, back again with part 3 of our 3-part series here. This is the final part. This is the end product, which you're actually going to be doing today. Just no whittling, just painting. I'm going to show you how I go about painting a figure like this. It'll be a little quicker than the last 2 videos, which I'll have links for right up here. So you see the video number 1 was the rough out, video number 2 was the detail work, and this will be the painting. So the end product will look like this. And you can see how I approach my my whittles from beginning to end, at least little figure whittles like this in basswood. Again, this is a 4-inch piece of basswood, 1.25 inches. But here's the final product, which we'll be putting the paint on today. But more importantly, as I mentioned in the last 2 videos, we're giving away this knife. This here knife was generously made by one of my viewers, Black Bart, aka Mark, who made this knife and told me he would like to have me give this away. And it's, a thumbs up to Mark and his kind generosity. He's made me a number of knives, and this is one we're going to be giving away in this video. We used it for the rough out, so if you want to see it in action, check back video number 1 in this series so you can see it in use. But anyway, to get in the running, as I mentioned in the prior 2 videos, just leave comments. I need you to leave a comment in all 3 videos so I know you're really interested in this knife. Just tell me that you're interested in the Black Bart 04 knife. I'll have the instructions right up here as well. Leave that comment, and maybe a week or 2 from now we'll do a running. I'll randomly choose someone who commented from the videos, and we'll ship this knife out to you. But anyway, let me get things set up. I'll get out my painting supplies, and I'll show you how I go about painting this little figure. Alrighty, I'll be right back. We're going to be using these 6 paints over here. I tend to work with just primary colors. You have your red, your blue, and your yellow. I use this linen color, the white, maybe a little green. Sometimes I add these 3 when I'm doing skin tone for my characters. And I paint slightly different than I see most people. I paint very translucent and very almost like a stain. So I use a lot of water and I kind of stain the wood. I like the grain to show through. I don't like an opaque finish on my pieces. I want to make sure that you can see that they're wood and not just wood covered in plastic paint, because acrylic is essentially just plastic paint. So I try to water them down so some of the grain shows through, so it still has the character of the wood. Even though it's basswood and there's not a lot of character to it, you can still see a little bit of the grain, and I personally find that appealing. So anyway, I'm going to go about my process and show you how I paint the figure. So I'm going to get everything set up and I will be right back. Okay, I laid out a few paints here. The primary colors that I mentioned, the red, as you can see, yellow, and a little blue. I add a little bit of water to each of these little trays that I have here, these little, dishes. As I said, I keep my paint fairly watered down. So what I tend to work with is complementary colors. If I'm going to do the shirt like an orange color and the pants like a blue color, it's complementary colors. I think they just, they look good together to me. So I just mix up a little bit over here, and you can see it's kind of watered down. So I just mix up a little color here. I sometimes add a tint of its complement, in this case the blue, and I just add that in there, and I go in and I start painting. Sometimes I put multiple coats on. As you can see, it's a very, very light stain on the wood. And like I said, sometimes I'll go back and I'll add an additional, another coat to deepen it a little bit more. But this is the way I go about it. So some of this video here, I'm just going to kind of speed through a bit, because that's just me applying paint, and that's probably not the most exciting thing to watch, but I just wanted to give you an idea. The reason sometimes I'll go back and I'll put multiple coats is I like to get the some depth in the crevices, and sometimes if you put multiple coats on, you can achieve that. The paint and it'll go into the little hollows of those crevices and deepen them a little bit more, and be a little bit darker. Okay, I thought I'd just jump back in here. I tend to work from lighter colors to darker colors. Because sometimes when you're using a watered down paint like this, it tends to bleed into other areas a bit. So if you work from light to dark, you'll get your if you have any bleeding, you'll be able to cover it up with the slightly darker paint. I paint like this because I think it adds a little bit more depth to the painting itself, or to the whittle itself, rather than just a flat. You can kind of see a little bit of the grain coming through here a bit, but there you go. That's like the first coat on the shirt done. So what I'll do at this point is I can let it dry. Sometimes I'll just get a hair dryer and dry it up, and then I'll apply a second coat. So let me do that, and I'll be right back. Okay, I'll dry it up. So back into the paint again for a second coat. If you want your figures to be more, the colors to be more opaque, then just apply the paint directly out of the tube. You don't have to water it down like I'm doing. I want my whittles, like I said earlier, I want them to look like wood. And I want to make sure you can still understand and see that these are wood. And that may seem kind of odd. Of course they're wood. But, today we have so many things that are printed, 3D printers and plastic figures and all that kind of stuff that, you're not really sure from looking at it if it's very opaquely done, if it's wood or not. So I want to make sure that mine look like wood. There you go. You got a nice orange shirt on over there. All right. We're going to give these, we did a little V-neck on him. So inside there, we'll maybe give him a little blue and a little red. We'll make a little violet color, for him. That's why I mentioned working in, you don't really, you can see here how it's, you with just 3 colors, you're getting a whole bunch of different colors in here. So it's kind of the way I like to do things. So I'm going to just come in here and just carefully hit that with a little violet. And also, by doing it this way, you're keeping the colors in the same, they're basically, you have a hint of each color in the other one. I don't know if you can see a little purple in there, violet purple. So there you go. You can kind of see there. All right. I'm going to let this dry, and I'll be right back. Okay. His shirt's all dry, so now we'll work on the pants. What I'm going to do here is mix up a little blue and orange, mostly towards the blue. Again, I'm using all the colors in the mix to tie them all together. And it helps add a little bit of additional dimension to your paint. Okay, all nice and dry. I come back and I put a little second coat on here. Just add a little bit more depth. Like I said, it'll tend to, the paint tends to pull into the little crevices there, so it darkens those up. I know a lot of people use like a antiquing solution when they're done to get a little depth in their whittles. There's these acrylic paints. Most of the manufacturers sell what's called an antiquing solution. If you're going to paint translucent like this or in a water staining fashion like I do, you can't use the antiquing solution. It'll just muddy everything up and it'll look brown. You have to apply that over an opaque paint. So if you're used to using the antiquing solution, it's not going to work doing it this way. And I'm just kind of jumping back in here. You can kind of see I don't really concern myself with the color being, since I'm painting very translucent like. If the color varies as I mix it, I don't really mind that, because again, I think it takes away from the flatness. If you paint opaquely, you're just straight out of the tube, it's very homogeneous, the color that you apply. And I don't particularly like that look. I like to have variations in tone on the painting. So, excuse me, I keep saying painting, on the whittle. And I think doing it this way kind of helps. You can kind of see here, you get a nice you get nice depth in the painting and enough variation where it's interesting, I think. All right, I'm going to just let that coat dry and I'll be right back. He has a little patch that we put on there when we whittled, and I'm just going to add a little bit of red to that. Now, I painted over it initially. I wasn't sure I was going to do a different color, but you know, I think we whittled it in. We should make it stand out a bit. So I'm just going to put a little bit of red paint on that. Now for his shoes, his boots, we're gonna paint those brown. So what I typically do is I'll get all my paints together. If you start mixing them together, you're gonna get a brown. So yellow, red, blue. You can kind of see over here. I'm getting a brown out of it. This is the thing you typically don't want to do when you're painting, because it basically is just mud. But when you're doing boots like this, it's perfectly fine, because that's kind of the color you're going for. And again, we're just using all the colors that we've been using, so they're all they play nice together, so to speak, because when you're painting, you want to have your paints coordinated, so to speak, I guess, for lack of a better word. And if you use a few colors and just mix the colors you need from those, they tend to harmonize a little bit better together. You could change the color of the sole a little bit if you want there, make this a little bit darker, but and I might do that. I'll see. But there you go. That's all there is to it. For skin tone, what I typically use is a bit of the I think it's a basil green, whatever. It's kind of a lighter green, a little red, and a little of that. A linen, I believe it's called. Yeah, it's like a linen color. It's an off-white, and then maybe a tad bit of white. Same kind of thing. I just add a little water here. Majority of the paint's going to be this linen color, but to add a little bit more dimension to it, I might lighten it a bit with the white. Add a tiny bit of green in there. And a tiny bit of red. And that's how I get my skin tone. So you can kind of see in there. And then I just apply it right on there. There's not a lot of skin on this one over here, so. Don't worry if you get it in the eyes or on the hair or what have you, because again, we're gonna change those a little bit. You can barely notice any difference, but that's Basswood's already sort of in the right family. You're just helping it out a bit. You can kind of see there. It's a little different. It might not show up as well on camera, but it's different. Now, what I like to do is add a tiny bit of red, a little bit deeper red. Not a lot. And I just kind of tap his cheeks a bit and his end of his nose. Kind of like so. I don't know if you can, how well that's going to show up on camera, but you know, that's kind of how I do it. And might just add a bit more. There you go. Kind of like that. I think it helps a little bit more. And then I do the same thing in his mouth over here. The little lips down here. That he's got the little lip. Just add a little bit of that color in there. Oh, too much in this case. So I'm just going to come back and kind of, we're going to do his beard and everything, so it's probably going to have to be redone anyway, but I'll put a little bit of a tint in there for the time being. Kind of like so. If you like a little bit more in the cheeks there, as it's starting to dry a little bit, you can kind of go back and just touch it with your brush. And then I just will remove a little bit with my finger, like so. There you go. Okay, for the eyes, I use a slightly smaller brush. And I just kind of come in here and I hit it with a little white, that's all. Not a whole heck of a lot because there's just not too much there. We'll come back and we'll put a little pupil in there afterwards. It helps if you have a better brush than I'm using right now. This is kind of falling apart. This used to be a good brush, but I've beat it up a little bit now. It's not holding a point well enough. There you go. It's got a little bit white in the eyes there. Looks a little freaky now. Actually, I decided that for the hair, we're just going to use some of the colors that we have out. Wasn't too sure what color I was going to do, but I think I'm going to go with like a brownish color, brownish red hair. So I'm going to take the green and the red. Since they're complements of each other, they will make a browner shade. Let's see what that looks like. Interesting. I'm going to go with it for now. Probably come back in and darken it up a bit. Okay, I just kind of darken the paint just a little bit more, add a little blue and yellow to it, just to kind of deepen it a little bit more. We're going to, like I mentioned in the beginning of the video, we're going to come back with a dry brushing technique to highlight some of the areas, and it'll add a little like little gray hair to the guy. That is basically what it'll wind up doing. And then on top of that, you also have to consider the type of finish you're going to put on here. If you watch my videos in the past, the ones that I've painted, you know that I use Howard Feed and Wax, and that's kind of an oil-based finish, oil and wax-based finish. So it really brings the piece together. But since it's got a bit of a hue to it, a bit of a darker hue, yellowish hue to it, it does tend to also darken some of your colors. Which is fine, because if you paint with that in mind, you don't paint too dark. And also acrylics dry a little bit darker than when they go on, so you have to build that into it as well. But as long as you're factoring all that into it, you're good. So I'm just kind of finishing up the hair here, and I'm going to let it dry up, do any touch-ups we need, and then come back and do a little dry brushing before we put our finish on. As long as you have a hair dryer, you can go through. I would recommend drying it between. When I go off camera here, that's essentially what I'm doing, just getting the hair dryer out and letting it dry. The other thing to keep in mind when you're applying this craft acrylic paint, or any acrylic paint for that matter, it doesn't have to be craft acrylic, but any watered down paint, it does tend to raise the grain a bit. So that's where the Howard Feed and Wax comes in, because that raised, when you add water to wood, as I'm sure most of you know, it does tend to raise the grain a bit. So it may look initially like you didn't do a very good job cleaning up your wood, but sometimes it just raises the grain just a bit. And but when you apply the Howard Feed and Wax on that, it tends to bring that in, brings that all under control a bit. There you go. Now he's looking good. He's got some nice fancy hair, this boy. Okay, I did forget one thing. We'll give him a little detail to his eye here. So I'm just kind of coming in here with this fancy painting brush here. I'm going to put a little dab of blue right here. I find that the toothpick works the best. Like so. I like to put the eye slightly, looking to one side. There you go. Okay, after that's thoroughly dry, I come back in with just a hint of black paint, and I go right, well, I attempt to go right in the middle there. That's it. You really don't notice it all that much. Sometimes I'll add just tiny bit of white after those eyes dry. I'll put it just to bring out a little bit of reflected light. sides. Just like so. Can you see that? Yeah, it's just a bit more reflected light off the eye there. So there you go. I'm gonna let everything dry. I'm gonna do our dry brushing. Be right back. Okay. After everything's dry, we can come back in here and do what's called the dry brushing technique. So I put a little paint on my brush over here, and I wipe the bulk of it off. I usually test it on my hand over here. We want very little paint on there, and I just kind of go back and I hit. You kind of see as I'm going along here, I'm just hitting the highlights. You just run your brush over top, and it'll just scrape along those facets that we put in there. And I'll just add a bit more, like he's got gray streaks going through his hair. Again, keep the brush fairly dry. You don't want a lot of paint on there. Even across his eyebrows, I think, too. You can kind of see it's adding a bit more stuff to the hair here. Okay, same thing for the pants and shoes, maybe. Just kind of come back in here and just kind of hit it just a little bit. It's one of those things where you kind of don't want to overdo it, although I always tend to overdo it. And I'm even going to kind of just lightly hit his shirt as well. Typically, the only place I don't do it is on the skin. I'll just do a little bit on the clothes. It just adds another dimension. Kind of looks like light reflecting off wrinkles and stuff like that. We are finally coming to the completion of this long video series. Like I mentioned earlier, for the people who have stuck with me, I really do appreciate it. I know it's long, and I hope it was beneficial, but there you go. The painting's all done. Next step is I'm going to let this dry, and we're going to do the Howard feed and wax. We'll be right back. Final phase in this little whittle here. We're going to apply Howard feed and wax, which is listed as wood polish and conditioner. It's got beeswax and orange oil in it, and I find it really works great on whittles. I used to paint with oil paint on the whittles, and just a lot more cleanup, a lot more. It actually, I think, works better because the oil and wood work a lot better than water and wood. As I mentioned before, the water tends to raise the grain a bit. The Howard's feed and wax kind of is the best of both worlds, because you paint acrylic and then you add this finish to it, and as long as you're painting somewhat translucent or stain like, it still allows it to penetrate the wood. It's not a complete plastic seal, so it allows the Howards to soak into the wood over time. It takes a few days to dry, but I really like it. I like the way it looks, and I like how it finishes the piece. So I just actually put a little bit on and brush it back into place over here. So that's all I do, and it really improves the whittle quite a bit. All those little raised areas kind of go away when it dries on there. It actually feels better. It doesn't feel as dry. You can kind of see it adds a little bit of a sheen initially, but that tends to fade over time. It just deepens, I think, all the colors. I can't, Howard's pays me good money to speak for them. No, obviously they don't. If they want to, I'm more than happy to, but I'm not sponsored by them. But I found their product really to be the best thing for whittles. To me, it really improves the whittles ever since I've been using it. I've been using it for years and years and years. Now, the downside, of course, is on a permanent finish. Since it's a wax and an oil, periodically it would probably need to be reapplied. So, if you're keeping the whittle for yourself, then fine. Every so often, if I feel they're dried after a few years or so, I might throw another coat on there. But if you give it to people, you got to make them aware that it's a wax finish and they should finish it with periodically, depending on the conditions it's kept in. There you go. You let it soak in. I might go back after it soaks in initially. I might go back and add another little coat, but that's all I do. And I think you can kind of see already. It brings everything together. To me, it makes it. It really enhances the look and the feel. Right now, it looks a little shiny because the light in here and the fact that it's still pretty wet. But you'll see it when it's a little bit drier. What I do is I let it dry. Probably, I typically like to go overnight and let it dry for a good period of time. Try to get it in all the little crevices, because a lot of times it might be frayed wood like around the nose over here or into the mouth area, and it'll get in there and it'll soak into all those little that little raised areas of green, and it'll calm it down quite a bit. So there you go. Okay, that's pretty much the end of the whittle here. It's still the whittle here is still a little wet from the Howard Feed and Wax finish. I'll let it soak in for maybe overnight or so, and then I wipe off some of the excess. And if I need to reapply it, I will at that time. But you've seen me go through the entire phase from a block of wood to the rough out, to the detail, to the painting. And this is my process for doing little figure carvings like this. I know it's a long series, so I appreciate everyone who's hung in there. I do hope you found it beneficial. Let me know in the comments if this type of format, this long series, where the videos are probably, I guess, are going to turn out to be probably over an hour long. If you find that, good, if you like that format, and we'll see about doing more videos like that in the future. But that's really it. I do appreciate everyone who's watched and the comments to date. It lets me know what everyone's thinking, and again, very much appreciate it. And again, another thumbs up to Mark with the knife that he made that we're going to be giving away. Again, as I mentioned in the beginning part of it here, if you're interested in that knife, just leave a comment in all three of these videos and let me know. I want to make sure it goes to someone who really wants a whittling knife. It's not just going to resell it or something, because I've heard that in the past that could be potential. I've given a few other knives away, and I wanted to go to someone who's going to be using it. So just like I mentioned, leave your comments in all three of the videos that you're interested in that knife, and in a few weeks we'll announce the winner of that one as well. But alrighty, that's it for me now. I do appreciate it. I hope you all have a great whittling week. Take care.